Welcome to another episode of The Unstarving Musician. I'm Rabonzo, your host, creator of the show. How's it going? Are you keeping it together? Are you alright? Keeping your self-centered self in check? I hope so. My guest for this episode is session touring trumpet player Johnny Thirkell, and man, does he have some stories. We don't talk a lot about those, but we do allude to them, and you can check out his book, which we talk about. First, my feedback on the Bad Bunny Super Bowl halftime show. It was entertaining, and it was great seeing Gaga and Ricky Martin join him. What a visual spectacle, and if you're bummed that he sang exclusively in Spanish, don't feel bad. I speak Spanish, and I couldn't understand most of what he was singing, but anyway, it was cool. The game? Meh. But congrats to the Seattle Seahawks. I was actually rooting for them. So how does a session musician actually get hired by the likes of David Bowie or Paul McCartney or stay in rotation with major artists for decades? Most musicians assume it's about talent and luck. Johnny Thirkell spent 50 years playing trumpet for some of the biggest names in music, having played on 38 number one albums. His resume is ridiculous. Bowie, McCartney, George Michael, The Who, Jamiroquai, Pet Shop Boys, Tina Turner, Eric Clapton, and on and on and on. We talk about business systems, relationships, and genuinely caring. We also hit on the relationship building framework that gets you in the room for some of these sessions, these incredible sessions like his, the pricing strategies that make session work sustainable, the professional standards that ensure callbacks, the adaptation decisions that survive 50 years of technology and business model changes. We're breaking down the session musician business model today, but the principles transfer to any sustainable music career. In Johnny's new book, Blown It, you can read what it's like behind the scenes from the mundane to the madcap. Blown It, that is now a one-man show starring Johnny Thirkell. You can learn about the book, the one-man show, and Johnny's incredible career at johnnythirkell.com. And now, here is me speaking with Johnny Thirkell.
Did the movie Billy Elliot ever make it to the US? Was that a popular movie?
Mm-hmm.
Well, so that was shot in the village where I grew up, and in fact, the coal mine where he worked. I worked there when I left school for 3 years. So that's where it was, in the Northeast.
Where'd you go to school?
I went to a grammar school in a town called Peterlee, the next town along. And then, after that, I went to work for a few years, and then went to a college of music in Leeds.
Very nice. I've heard of Leeds.
Yeah, yes.
having been famous for a couple of big reasons that come to mind for me, but initially I think just from knowing some of the famous concerts that have been played there many decades back.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, well, the Who live at Leeds, that was filmed in the university, in the Students' Union of the university that I went to. So,
man, that's amazing.
But before my time, though. Right? He hastens to add.
Yeah, I was. I'm sure it was done after I was born, but I would have been a wee lad, as you guys say.
Yeah. Yes. Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed.
And what was it like growing up there, where you grew up?
It's pretty grim, really. It's much grimmer now, Roberta, because they don't even have the coal mines anymore. They're all gone. So these people have got nothing really. But at least I guess when I grew up, there was work and people were working. But it's a pretty dirty, tough existence, right? Nobody really would choose to go underground and do a 10-hour shift underground in a filthy, dirty environment.
Right.
But I had a happy childhood. I wouldn't complain about that at all. There's a good sense of community, and I think it's a lot in the sort of Rust Belty places or in the US. I'm not sure where the mining industry is, but I think it's a fairly universal picture, right? That these communities, they're hard and people are tough and resilient, but they make good communities, right? They all kind of make the best of it.
Yeah, that sounds about right. From what I do understand, I didn't grow up in a community like that, but that's
Where are you
sounds
from
like a
originally then, Roberta? You from the States originally?
yeah, Fort Worth, Texas. My
Okay.
father was an undocumented immigrant back in his day. He was born like in 22, which came into my focus when I moved to Mexico and wanted to get dual citizenship and realized he had no birth certificate on record, but so I had to go hunting for
Wow.
that. But so he became a citizen eventually, and my mom was like third or fourth generation Texan, born on the border, born near a border in a border town near Mexico, and raised in Texas. But that was back when the border was like extremely fluid, uh,
Yes,
a
indeed.
far contrast from today. But yeah, I grew up there and spent most of my life there. I met my wife there, and we moved to California together, and then ended up in Panama and here eventually.
Okay,
Mm.
nice. I mean, it feels like a gentler place. I know Mexico has its issues, of course, but it feels like a gentler place to me, having been there just only a couple of times.
Sure, but I mean, especially where I am. But I mean, there's a lot of great places. I imagine if they didn't have some of the problems that they do have with security and violence, it would be that way just about everywhere. But
Yeah,
I guess we can say that about any
yeah.
place.
I guess so. I guess so. I guess so. Yeah.
well,
Not,
well,
not,
well. Thank you. By the way, you were thanking me, but thank you for taking time out to speak with me. I'm really appreciative, though, because people who listen to the podcast and read my newsletter are a lot of them early trajectory, or some of them not so much, but they're independent musicians, so they're always trying to learn. And so this is a nice opportunity for me to try and extract some useful bits of this and that from your career, which, by the
yeah.
way, has been pretty incredible from what I could tell. You played. I'm going to set it all up in the introduction. I'll record later, but man, I was telling my wife you've recorded with and toured with just about everybody. And, the two big names that I think I wrote down here were David Bowie and Paul McCartney, but there's a ton of other big ones that are on that list too.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah,
nuts.
look, I've been very very fortunate, I think. And yeah, look, I mean, actually, what I really love the tenor of the questions that you sent an email, Roberta, which and I think these are, I've as part of the sort of promo for this book, I've done maybe 15 podcasts. And actually, these are refreshingly nice. These questions, the angle is different to all of the others. They've all really, the others been just the book and this mad stories, being kidnapped by the Japanese mafia and all that sort of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Uh, Not again, but yeah, I like the angle of these. I found that very interesting. So I'm very, very happy to do it. Thank you.
Well, good. I appreciate it, and I'm going to kind of start backwards, I guess, and ask you if there's like a particular story that from your journey that kind of captures what it actually takes to build a career like yours.
Yeah, I think that affability is a huge skill. Everybody wants to work with people that they like. Yeah, and I think this idea of regularity and people using you again and again and again and again. It really comes down to understanding what people want and then giving it to them, right?
Mm.
I mean, sorry, was your question about some a story from like a tale of daring do, or are we into discussing the business? Sorry,
No,
I'm
I like where you were going. I might just add to the question, or are there or were there things you were actually doing during your career that some other musicians might miss or not think about?
if you're asking the question that is kind of the key to longevity as a career, it is. I think it's about being easy to be around. Obviously, there is a primary a primary requisite, which is that you need to be able to do the job. Okay, but I think there are thousands of people who can do the job. There's this train of thought that says good enough is good enough, right?
Yeah.
So there are lots of sort of virtuoso musicians who can do this and they can do that, and they're incredible chops. And so, but if you're an asshole, then nobody wants to. Do you know what I mean? It's really is if you're good enough to do the gig and to the standard that's required. Then after that, it's about other things, right? It's about getting along with people. Often, I will. go to a session and you'll see some guys there, like it's usually the strings, sorry, but they'll like we will do a take. And then they listen back to it, and the strings get out the newspaper, and they sit there reading it. They're kind of just actively looking disinterested. Um, and I've even seen people like writing out their invoice, and I think, well, at least wait until the session's finished, right? And for me, so I would make a point of going into the control room and listening back. And if I hear something that I'm not happy with, then I would point it out. And that goes down really well with people. But I think, Roberto, I mean, it's. I don't do it as a sort of act. I care about these things. If it has my name on it, then I want it to be the best it can possibly be. Certainly, my contribution. I can't control anybody else's contribution. People recognise that, and I think people really appreciate it. If you're an artist, all of my perspective is from that of a session musician. But I go on a session, and the artist, whoever it is, doesn't matter what kind of music it is, doesn't matter what it, maybe a jingle or a TV theme or somebody's album, whatever. They've put their heart and their soul and their time and their effort and their energy and their money and everything they've put into that. How demoralizing is it, right, to see a bunch of guys reading the paper in the middle of it's horrendous. And I think it really it's sort of like if you're walking along up the street and you see someone with a pushchair or stroller, as you guys would call it. It's like looking in there and saying, "Geez, that's an ugly baby." Right? You just wouldn't do that, right? And it doesn't matter whether you like the music. That's not important, right? It doesn't matter whether it's your kind of music or you're there to enhance that music, and I think the key is just caring about it, right? Take everything, make everything as serious, take everything as seriously as you possibly can, and people appreciate that. They really do appreciate that.
Yeah, I can certainly understand that, and I guess I talk about some of those things with my bandmates now. I'm playing with some younger guys, and I do a lot of writing about all this too. So I hear it from others, and it's nice to hear it just goes that way all the way up.
Yeah, look, I think as a studio player, right, the keys to success, I think, lie in the mundane, right? There is a great article that I read some time ago. It was about actually Mark Spitz, the swimmer. And the article was entitled "The Mundanity of Excellence." And I think the key to a successful career, as in any kind of musician, not just a studio musician, is lies in the mundane things, right? Be on time, okay? Like on time is late, so always be there, ready to rock. At least 15, 20 minutes before you have to play your first note, okay? When you get there, my job is to find out what the producer or the artist, what is it they want, right? So I need to talk to them. I need to listen to them. I need to work out, and then so that's my job, is to find out what they want and then make sure I give it to them, right? And I'm there until they get what they want. And yes, just being on time, being reliable, being interested, caring, just being as professional as you can. It sounds pretty dull, but you can having the most incredible chops. If it's not about you; it's about who you're playing for. Right? It's about who's paying the bill.
Right.
Mm.
I'm reminded as you said, "On time is late," and I'm familiar with that concept. And it's kind of a joke that Latin Americans and Mexicans included are, 15 minutes, 20 minutes late is on time. So I have to think about how to reframe that humorously for my friends here.
But I mean, it's a very subtle kind of disrespect, I think. Right?
Sure.
I mean, it's like you are making the assumption that your time is more important than somebody else's time.
Sure.
It's not a great way to start.
Right. Okay. Tell me as I lead into this next question. Please feel free to fact check me, but I haven't read the book yet. But from what I understand, it does talk about going from the colliery band, I hope I pronounced that right, to playing with Buddy Rich,
Yep.
from Working Men's Club to Wembley. And I was thinking
Yeah.
that's not necessarily the typical conservatory trained session player path. And so I wanted to ask, how did you, without like the stereotypical, and I'm doing air quotes, stereotypical credentials, if there's such a thing, break into elite session work as you did?
Um, well, I mean, I can. The potted history is. Um, I was working, as I said, in a coal mine, and it took me about 10 minutes to work out that I'm just not doing this for the rest of my life. I need something different. And playing the trumpet was about the only thing I was any good at. So I went to night school and I got some more qualifications. At regular school, I was the kid at the back of the room who was always mucking about.
Hmm.
And so, I didn't get great results when I left school. So I got some more qualifications, and I managed to get into the music department at Leeds. And then a couple of months into my second year, I got a break. I mean, I got an incredible break. Uh, I was in a pub with a bunch of friends, and someone introduced me. He said, "Hey, Johnny, this is my friend Mike. He's a trumpet player. You guys will get along, I'm sure." So I'm chatting to Mike, and I said, "Okay, well, what are you up to, Mike?" And Mike said, "Well, I'm in a band on the QE2, the cruise ship." And bearing in mind, like a year and a half earlier, I'd been digging coal for a living. So I said, wow, that must be amazing. And he said to me, "Well, yeah, I mean, it is, but I'm trying to get, I've had enough now. I'm trying to get off, but I can't find anybody to replace me." So took a sharp intake of breath, and I said, "I'll do it." And he said, "Really?" "Yeah, well, absolutely." So he said, "When can you start?" And I said, "Well, when would you like me to start?" He said, "Well," he's kind of said jokingly, "Well, how about Tuesday?" This was on a Friday night. And I said, "Yeah, Tuesday works for me." "Really?" "Okay, great." So I finished my beer, I went home, packed my bags, and drove down to Southampton, and never went back to college again. Um, so yeah, and that took me. So I did a little bit of time on the QE2. I was able to study with a famous teacher a trumpet teacher in New York called Carmine Caruso. Um, and yeah, after about 14 months, I think on the QE2, I got off the ship and I just moved to London. I think there's something about youth. I think I was just too stupid to be scared. You know what I mean? Or
Right.
too naive to be scared. I just went there. Um, and yeah, you just hang out and you know the score better, right? There's the kind of fine line between being pushy and just being friendly, and that's a line you have to tread. But I just went to every gig I could possibly go to, and I chatted to to the guys in the band afterwards and in the break, and just I'm a fairly affable character. I can sort of read the room. And yeah, gradually you build up kind of a network of friends. Ultimately, one of those guys needs a sub, and there'll always be a gig where nobody's available, and they get down far enough down the list to come across your name, right? And you go there and you do a good job, and so yeah, great. Everybody needs a good sub. Everybody needs somebody they can trust. And then I guess it's just you kind of keep on doing that and build an upward spiral, really. So, um, yeah, started off doing just kind of pub gigs or weddings, bar mitzvahs, that kind of stuff, and you sort of slowly build a reputation again for being good, for being reliable. Look, I would never ever claim to be the greatest trumpet player in the world. But I've managed to make a 45-year career at pretty much the pointy end. Okay, as you mentioned earlier, I've got a fairly healthy CV. But I think a lot of that is down to the fact that I treat it in a sort of professional way. It's not a hobby; it's my job, and yeah, you just treat it properly. Just everything you do has to be the best that you can possibly do. And if it's got my name on, I became renowned, Roberta, and it doesn't matter how big. And I've done this with 40-piece orchestras and four-piece horn sections. If I make a mistake, I will sabotage the take. I will. I became
To do it over.
yeah, yeah. There's no because it's gonna if it has my name on there, I don't want it out there unless it is the best I can possibly do. And yeah, I have done it with a 40-piece orchestra too.
I love it.
Because those I mean, those things are better. This right? I mean, some of my first number one record. I've had 38 number one albums. My first one was in 1981. Imagine if I'm making records then and there's mistakes on them. I've had 81, 91, 1011. I've had 45 years to listen to that. Just that I don't want it, right? If it's got my name on it, then I want it to be the best I could possibly do.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that so that's sort of briefly the journey from the collieries to working in London. Um, yeah, thereafter it's just about knowing what your client wants and giving. It sounds very sort of corporate, but I guess that's the way you have to look at it, right? My job is to give whoever's paying my wages, give them what they want.
sure. Well, I think in a way it's demystifying it a little bit. People may think there's something special beyond what we're talking about so far, anyway, and it really is a lot of basics, or as you alluded to earlier, the mundane.
Yeah, sure. Look, I know, and obviously, look, I wouldn't name names, but I know lots of guys, phenomenal players, absolutely phenomenal. I mean, I can't even, if I lived to be 1,000, I'd never play like that. But for them, okay, they turn up to work and it's about them,
Mm.
right? Their interest is showing people how great they are, and nobody cares. Nobody
Right.
cares. I just want you to do the job, and I think that's something which gets missed a lot. Like I say, there is that school of thought that says good enough is good enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
Beyond that, it's about being I mean, if you, so a lot of the touring, in fact, the majority of the touring I've done with bands has come out of playing with them in the studio. So I'd been booked for a session. I do the session, get along with the guys. And when they come to do a tour and they want to take a horn section, oh, who's that? Who's the little northern guy? He was quite fun.
Yeah. Great.
So no, they don't think. Okay, who was the best trumpet player out of them? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'll give you a case in point. So I have played and still play with a group called Swing Out Sister.
Hmm.
So in '85, I think it was, we had a number one record with a song called Breakout.
Hmm.
Um, and originally, that tune Breaker actually only has two trumpets, but the rest of the album was fairly big band. A friend of mine called Richard Niles lives in California. He had done the horn arrangements, and there were four trumpets, and I was probably the least talented of the four, if I'm honest with you. But it's me that asked to do the tour, and I think it's because I know more jokes than the others, or I think when you genuinely care about something, people can see that,
Yeah.
and those are the people that you want on the road.
Right.
Guys, you're going to get along with you. Nobody, if you're going to live on a bus for 3 months with people, nobody wants an asshole.
Right.
They
I
want they
figure it's
want
a
they want a good
combination.
guy.
I figure it's a combination of that and they feel like you can hack the whole
Yes.
tour existence, and you obviously have, over the years, having built a resume, they know, okay, well, he can do that part, that's for sure, and he seems like he's a really nice guy.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's how a moderately talented trumpet player such as myself has been able to sustain a career at the pointy end for 45 years.
Well, I've heard some of your playing, and you sound quite good to me. So, um, yeah, I
Thank
look
you.
forward to listening to some more too. So I hope I'm not drilling on the same theme here, but um, sort of thinking about client acquisition. So you've worked with George Michael, David Bowie, Paul McCartney, The Who. That's not really like, doesn't seem like random luck. How does a session musician actually get in the room with artists at that level? Walk me through your, like, if there's a system or your method, or how you reflect on
Yeah.
building those relationships.
I mean, I guess there are a few ways, and obviously I'm speaking quite UK centric here. But we have, I guess, what we would call a fixer. I guess contractor maybe might be the term in the US. Okay, and so they sometimes an artist or a record company they will contact a contractor and say, I need two trumpets, two saxes, blah blah, whatever. Okay, that's so you need to build a relationship with the contractor. And again, I would do that by being so by being the guy who the contractor rings you up, tells you the time and the place, and then they can forget all about it, and they're absolutely comfortable that you're going to be there on time, ready to go, and do a good job.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one strand. I guess another is you reputation. So I'll give you an example. I have a long history with the band Jamiroquai. I've played with Jamiroquai since the very beginning, on and off, since 1992. In '93 we released Emergency on Planet Earth. That's the first album. And that came out of having played on that tune Breakout by Swing and Sister. It was a Jay, of Jamiroquai, was a big fan of that record. And when he wanted horns on the album, he said to the label, okay, see this tune here, Breakout, I want the guy who did that. So so that's another way, you build up sort of a portfolio, and these things often lead on to something else. And the other thing is, I formed with a good friend of mine, a sax player called Gary Barnacle. We formed, and Peter Toms was a trombone player. We formed like like a regular horn section. It's very common these days. My good friend Jerry Hay has the Hay horns, and there's the Triple H. There's a whole bunch of them now. But then, back then, sort of mid '80s, this wasn't a thing. And so, our selling point was, well, the three of us work together all the time, so we have this kind of intuition, and we're much tighter than the other guys simply because we work together so much. So I guess those are three fundamental methodologies. But again, Roberta, it all boils down to, in all of these scenarios, it boils down to finding out what the client, what the guy wants, and then how do we give it to him? So you turn up on time, you're ready to go, and vocabulary. That's another thing, right? So I think, but the only advantage I have of the amazing. There are some incredible young trumpet players, and look, I'm sort of slowly retiring, but the only advantage I think I have over those young guys is that I understand different genres of music that they never grew up with. So if I go to a studio, for example, and someone says to me, "I want this to sound like the JBs, or right, or the Stax horns or something," I know exactly. I know how to make that sound. I know how to organize the section and make it sound like that. So that's another really useful thing is having, you know. If you want to be a studio player, or not even necessarily a studio player, just a gigging player, right? It's incumbent upon you to understand why certain genres of music sound like they do. You know what I mean? I mean,
Yeah,
if I go to a session and they say I want it to sound like the JBs, James Brown's section, well, then I know the alto goes on the top and then the trumpet underneath, rather than the other way around, and because that's that sort of sound.
sure. So I guess
Yeah,
it's worth studying those for the kids out there. It's worth studying the old genres and finding guys who know them really well to learn from.
100%, yes, and study them and try and understand them. Try and, okay, why does it sound like that? What is it they are playing? What is the sort of? I mean, if you're a guitarist, for example, um, what kind of sounds is he using, right? What sort of technique is he using? To understand all of those things. So when you go, like, even if you go on a gig like with a covers band, okay, then you're playing a whole range. I would imagine you're playing a whole range of different styles of music, and if you're going to shine through so much more if you understand how to make those sounds, right? In whatever genre it is, if you understand that, then you become more valuable. You're just making yourself more valuable, right? You're pushing yourself to the top of the list um, when it comes to finding a guitarist or a drummer. I mean, talking to you, Rebecca, you know, for example, the Tower of Power, that kind of 70s, that really sort of tight drum sound. And if you get to play one of those sort of tunes, you need to know. Yes, I don't not au fait particularly with drum technique, but you know what I mean. Understanding the sort of things that they would play, the sort of fills that they would play,
Totally,
you
yeah.
know, the kind of, it's not only just the rhythms, right, but the sound and this. These are all things which just make you more and more valuable, right, and more desirable.
Totally. Yeah, yeah, it's great advice. I have to go back to one of the first things you mentioned because it's a little funny. And probably you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, and maybe even applies to one of your notorious stories. But Fixer, what came to mind for me was somebody who makes like a literal dead body or some other ugly situation just go away. So they call this Fixer, and he's like an independent contractor, or she, who comes in quickly, gets out quickly. Nobody knows them.
Yes, that's we all need, we could all do with somebody like that, right? Yeah, but I mean, yeah, so someone, and I guess that's the joy of being an artist. Well, if you talk about making things go away, there's a story in my book which about being kidnapped by the Japanese mafia, and that was a we were that was the very first Jamiroquai tour to Japan, and I shan't drag the story out, but effectively we were stopped. You know, we'd been drinking all the way from London to Japan, and the customs guy's eyes lit up when we all poured ourselves off the aeroplane. Um, and yeah, we were taken into a back room, and out come the rubber gloves, and you know we were all getting a bit nervous. Um, and there was. I mean, all of a sudden, the whole thing evaporated, and we were allowed to go without being searched or anything like that. And it turns out that yeah, there were some interested parties who didn't really want the band to be thrown in jail or deported from Japan. And so, yeah, that kind of disappeared. And the following morning, I found myself being bundled into the back of a car and taken hostage until such time as the whole thing was sorted out.
Oh my
Uh,
gosh.
yeah,
Fixers, they
see,
name.
yeah, there somebody fixed it. Yeah, I mean, I suspect it was the mafia or something, but
Wow.
doesn't really matter. They fixed it. The problem went away.
Wow. That's crazy.
Mm.
Let's talk about money if we can, since that's part of what makes a career sustainable. Are there things that you can share that might be helpful to independents who are looking to get into session work in the future about how pricing works in the session world? And I realize that that has probably changed a lot, varied a lot over the years that you've been doing it. But like, how do you structure your rates, or how has that changed over the years?
Yeah, well, I guess the official way in the UK, and I believe it's quite similar in the US. You have the local these kind of local unions there. There is a rate. So there is a kind of a minimum rate for studio work here in the UK, and like lots of things, Roberta, the minimum rate has just become the rate, right, for most people,
Hmm.
and it's quite complex. So there's a basic session fee, and then if you overdub, if you do one overdub, it's 125% of the original fee, and a second overdub is 140%, and then there's porterage, and then there's this, and there's that, and basically. It's quite a convoluted and complex system, which I just don't like. Um,
Yeah, and a session
First
player
of
is
all,
supposed to keep up with all that.
yeah, they are. They're
That's
supposed to work it
crazy.
out. At
That's
the end of the session, they say, "Well, okay, I did three overdubs, and I did this, and then there's that, and we went over time 10 minutes, and blah blah." All the kind. Now, first of all, I hate the feel of that. Don't you? It feels just far too transactional for me. Do you know what I mean? I feel like I'm a plumber measuring up a job. I don't like the sort of transactional nature of that. And the second thing is that the record company or the producer or the artist, whoever's paying for it, they have no idea how much it's going to cost them. right? Because it depends on what you do on the day. So that is a variable that they don't like. But what often happens, Roberta, is that money starts to make musical decisions, and I think that's absolutely a bad thing. So, for example, somebody may say to you, "Oh, I'd really like another harmony on that horn part there, but I'm tapped out. I mean, I can't afford another 140%, right?" And you find yourself in a position where you're making musical decisions based on money. I hate that, right? The purpose of all of us, and I know it's how I feed my kids and send them to school and so on, but nevertheless, I think the music always has to be the most important part. Always, always, always. So my methodology is this is what I charge per track. And I will do as many overdubs as you like for that. I will do whatever. I'll be there until you're happy with what you've got. And if I'm good, then I'll be out of there quite quickly, right? Or if I'm not getting what it is you want, and then I might be in there for 10 hours. It doesn't really matter. But for me, that what that does is it gives the artist some clarity, right? They know what it's going to cost them, and but the other thing, the most important thing is you don't then start making musical decisions based upon money. I'd like another harmony in that section, but I can't afford it. Well, that's bad for me too, right? Because the bigger the sound, the fatter the sound, the better I'm going to sound, and the more people who will hear that record and say he's good, let's get him. Does that
Right.
make sense?
Yeah, yeah, totally. And I love that approach. It's something I've always tried to do in any type of work that I do, be it music or stuff I've done in tech and marketing. But yeah, to just like, yeah, here's the rate for the project kind of thing, and it's just
Yeah,
easier.
I think at all times you have to make, and what doesn't matter what it is, whether it's a gig or a wedding or anything, doesn't matter what it is. The music has to be the most important thing. It just has to be. That's how
Right.
you're going to build a reputation if you approach it that way. And I mean, you may as well work in a factory, right? If you play music, I know we've got to eat, we've got to feed our kids, and I'm not suggesting people undersell themselves because that's another important thing. It's important to know your worth and stick with it. But the most important thing at all times is making it sound as good as it can possibly sound. That's how you'll build a reputation, and that's how people will keep on coming back.
Right.
Mm.
I was going to ask you about, like getting the first call over and over, but I feel like you've kind of answered that, and then we've kind of you
I
kind of
think, yeah, it's perseverance. Just be around. Don't be, don't. There's a fine line between being pushy, okay, and being friendly, and just be a good guy to be around, and your chance will come. They say that luck is where opportunity meets preparation, right? And that's it. Just be ready. And if you're around long enough, and you put yourself around enough, and you're not pushy, but you're a good guy to be around. Sooner or later, your opportunity will come, and you just need to grab it with both hands and be bloody good. Uh, and the better you are, the more those opportunities will keep on coming. And then you just build an upward, you climb the ladder, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Would is it fair to say that asking is a great of great benefit, like for instance asking for the work, asking for the opportunity, and in concert with those other things that you just mentioned.
Yeah, I guess it's a tricky one. I think you've got to be very careful, right? You have to be very careful. Um, I think a smoother strategy, I think, is if you to get to know these guys. People love to talk about music, and people love to talk about their playing. People love to talk about themselves, right? So if you meet some guys in a band, then you talk to them and say, "Hey, I really love what you did there on the, in the chorus of that thing. How did you do that? What was it?" Right? And that's how you kind of build a relationship with people by just being interested. I think we've all had people, strangers, bowl up to us and say, I play the trumpet. I'm really good. Will you give me a gig?" That. that's not going to work, right?
Right,
But
right.
I think you need to build a level of trust, and often a good way to do that is interest. Say if you like what a guy does and you think you can do it, then I guess it's always a good thing to say, I really love that. How did you do that? People will warm to you that then, I think.
I like that. It's a nice way to articulate. Sometimes
Mm.
I think maybe I haven't always had the words for that, and it's very simple and yet elegant.
Yeah, it doesn't
Because
it doesn't feel pushy.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I very recently, in fact, it's just been a little over a week that I played with the drummer I've had my eye on since the first time I saw him in town about 2 years ago, and to my pleasant surprise, he was delighted. He's like really interested in coming back, but
Awesome.
when I think back to that first encounter uh, with him, I mean, we talked and stuff, and I just told him I really liked his playing, but I think it would have been a nice add to just like how did you do that thing, or like to just take note of something very specific. I think that probably makes the conversation more fun for them.
Yeah, yeah, and people love it. You're kind of complimenting the guy at the same time as being
Totally,
interested in what he's doing. Yeah.
totally.
Mm.
So, decades in the business means you've survived a lot of change. I dare I say massive industry changes from in tech, business models,
Yeah,
music trends.
for sure.
How do you think about adapting versus sticking with your strengths that you know well?
Well, I mean, I think, if you were to ask me what I was, I would say I'm a studio player. I mean, I've done lots of touring and all kinds of other stuff. But to all intents and purposes, I think of myself as a studio player. It's all I ever wanted to do from the very beginning, from the very early shoots of me deciding I wanted to do this for a living. I wanted to be a studio player. I love the challenge. I love the fact that every day, in fact, morning and afternoon sometimes are different. But sadly, I don't think it's possible anymore, Roberta, to be. I mean, I made a career just of being a studio player, and I don't think it's possible anymore. There's just not enough studio work around. The lack of the whole. I mean, I hate to pin everything on streaming, but it's difficult not to. The returns are so diminished that, particularly of horn players, right? That a lot of people, they say, well, I'd love to have a horn section, but I just can't afford it. And so I think it's not possible to be solely. There's a handful of people who can probably, but it doesn't sustain lots of people. You have to do other stuff too. Um, so I think in that respect it has changed. But I've always believed that with change comes opportunity. And I think, and if I look back, for example, to the '80s when the Linn drum came in, right, the drum machine came in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There were there were two types of drummer here in London. There were those who sat around moaning about the fact that it was taking their work away, and there were those who went out and bought one. I mean, who better to program a drum machine than a drummer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think change is inevitable. So you need to be, I think, aware of what's going on and just try and stay ahead of the curve, right? Okay, where's this all heading? And how do I make sure that I'm on the train? Yeah, as well as being a player, I have a number of businesses. I run some residential music courses, and I also have a company. We own master rights, like 20,000 master rights or something like that. And I've watched those revenues over the last 10 years, since the advent of Spotify and Deezer and those kind of streaming services. We've seen our revenues go down by 90%, 90%.
Wow, wow,
We're
wow.
making 10% now. So the writing was on the wall for that. And so we got into sync licensing.
Mm-hmm.
So, right, you got to keep, I think, you need to be aware of what's going on, and just try and keep ahead of the curve. So we got into sync licensing, and we've been able to ameliorate some of that loss, by these licensing deals. Similarly with AI, of course, that's the big challenge now, right? AI. So we've all got to sit down and think, okay, well, what are the things that AI can't do, or not, or can't do as well as a human being, and then get on that train, right, and focus on that, because we can't. It's in such a and the progress of change is so rapid now, isn't it? There's no time for sitting around on your laurels, right? You got to think, okay, where is this going? How do I get up in there? How do I insert myself into that? Um, and that's a question I'm afraid I'm not sure I know the answer to.
Yeah,
I guess,
it's moving fast.
but yeah, yeah, but I think the answer has to be sort of live music, maybe.
Mm,
Maybe. Roberto, when I first moved down to London, I arrived in London kind of green as wet behind the ears. Um, and all of the old kind of pros then, they would say, "Oh, geez, I'm glad I'm not you. I'm glad I'm not coming into the industry now. It's finished. It's over."
wow.
Okay, and that they were saying that because they weren't doing 15 sessions a week, 20, you know what I mean, anymore, like they used to do. But I'm still here, right? 45 years later, I've still made a career out of it. So I guess it's not all doom and gloom, right? I think maybe I'm hanging my hope on the idea that it's not worse, it's just different. Okay, so if we want to succeed in the music industry, we've got to look at where it's going. You can't. I mean, you can't be, you can't be sort of trying to hold back the sea.
Right, right. I did want to ask you about like kind of health and stamina. So you play, you've been playing trumpet at a really high level, and I imagine it is or can be physically demanding, whether it's the actual playing or the touring or the sitting and waiting or whatever it is. But
Yeah.
how has your approach to taking care of yourself changed over time, and what do you think young session players might not be thinking about with regard to long-term physical health?
Look, I think look, trumpet players are renowned for being unhealthy, right? That's they drink too much beer, and they don't get enough sleep. But I do like to keep fit. I like to keep healthy. I think it's another branch of taking care of business, right? And that's really what we're down to, isn't it? It's about taking care of business, and this idea of the things we've spoken about already. Finding out what the client wants and making sure they get it. I think it's incumbent upon us to have the energy, the stamina. As I said earlier, I think sometimes I've had a session where I'm just not getting what the guy wants, right? And so we'll try something and we'll track it up, and then they'll say, "Yeah, it's not quite right." So we'll try another approach, and we'll try something different. And so sometimes you can be there, well, not often, thankfully, but sometimes you can be there 8, 9 hours, trying to find the right sound for the guy, um, and that's hard work.
Yeah.
And so you need to be, you can't be flagging. You do need to be physically, in pretty good shape and healthy. Um, and as you alluded to earlier, touring. I mean, touring it's tough. I mean, at whatever level you do it in, right? It's not. It doesn't matter whether you're in the back of a splitter van, or but you're traveling in a sort of sleeper coach. The sort of bigger bands, you'll travel in the sleeper coach. You've got your own bunk, but that's only for overnight. We'll then go to a hotel and check into the hotel. So you're looked after very well. However, what I often say to people is being on tour, on a big tour, it's a bit like if you think about the day you go on holiday, right? That how tiring. Think how tiring that is. Okay, right? You got to get your bags. You got to get out here, and this whole thing. It's quite a tiring experience. Imagine doing that every day for 3, 4 months. So it doesn't matter how much luxury you're in, you still got to do that stuff, right? You still got to get up at 5 o'clock, or if you're flying, or I mean, I much prefer bus tours; they're much easier. But so you need to be in shape, otherwise you're just not going to make it, right? You're going to be exhausted. So yeah, touring can be quite hard, and also looking after yourself, not getting, you get in the dressing room and there's a whole the rider is there. Um, don't be a rider monster. You get guys who will go in there and it's like a swarm of locusts. They'll sweep across it. chocolate and cheese and ham and beer all at the same time. It's not good for you.
Right. I imagine it does, and I've talked about this and talked to other musicians about it. It does take some forethought too, in terms of like, okay, what am I going to do to take care of myself? How am I going to manage the, the inevitable eating
Yeah.
situations that are going to come up and
Yeah.
all that.
Yeah, well, I think I try and lose a bit of weight before I go on to because inevitably now I don't drink either, Roberta. So that's a plus for me. I,
Sure.
I used to drink, but I don't drink anymore. Alcohol, I mean. But yeah, I would always try and lose a little bit of weight before I went, knowing that just by dint of the lifestyle, right? You're going to be eating. I don't, as a trumpet player, I can't really eat before the gig, because if you've got a full stomach, it's hard to play the trumpet. So I tend to be eating, once the gig's done, right, 10:30 or whatever. That's not the healthiest way to live.
Right.
So yeah, you get guys who are runners. Okay, they'll and I admire those people. I'm not a runner. It's not a particularly English thing to do. Run. Um, um, but yeah, you get guys who are up, irrespective of what time we went to bed. They're up in the morning and they're out and about running. It's not my thing, but I like to actually since the advent of the Apple Watch and those sorts of devices, you can set yourself a target. Whatever it is, your 10,000 steps or 12,000 steps, whatever you want to do, and just make sure you're keeping active. And so I use that a lot actually, the health app on my Apple Watch, just to make sure that I am getting 10,000 steps a day, um, and I'm getting enough exercise, and yeah, I think you do have to work at it. A lot of people don't know.
Yeah. Sure. So after all these years, you've written what I believe is a memoir. Is that safe to say? And
That
and
it is, yeah, it is. It sounds rather grand, um,
but you've done a
but
lot.
it's
You've been around so many interesting people, and you've just had this long career. But why do it now, and why a
why
book
do it
rather
now?
than
Yeah,
say like a podcast series or a documentary or something like that?
yeah. Well, you may have guessed, but I can, I'm a talker. It's like the blue touch forever and stand well back, and then go make a cup of tea and come back, and I'll still be going. So over the years, in bars, in over the dinner table, right, I've been telling these stories for years. Like I said, kidnapped by the Japanese mafia, been shot at in the Philippines, I've been deported from America, I've been arrested twice. And all these things, I've been telling these stories for years, and people have been saying to me, "No, you should write this stuff down. You really should write it down." And I've always thought, well, who cares? Nobody's going to want to read this stuff. And then a very good friend of mine, one of these guys who'd been pushing me to write it down, he came to me one day and he said, "Can you imagine if you go up into the loft of your house and you found a book written by your grandfather just about his life?" My grandfather was a coal miner. Imagine if you found a book that your grandfather's written about his life. How would you feel about that? And that just took the legs from underneath me because I don't know about you, Roberta, but I would love that.
Yeah,
Right?
same.
Even if nothing happened in his life, imagine that, my grandfather's voice coming off the page. And that's what did it. I wrote this because I thought, well, one day do have grandchildren now. They're all very little, I hasten to add. But as they grow up, then I think they may be interested in hearing this stuff. That baldy old bloke. He wasn't always that way. They had an interesting life. So that I wrote it for that reason. I have been absolutely astounded by its success. I mean, it's beyond my wildest expectations, Rebecca. I sort of thought, well, maybe I'll be happy if I sell 100 copies. That'd be fine. That'll just cover the cost of the sort of little bits of promo. But I'm way over 1,000 copies, and I'm just absolutely. This book got to number 4 in the music business chart on Amazon,
That's
and
great.
yeah, it's amazing. I'm a barely literate half-wit. How that's happened, I've no idea. But look, I'm very, very grateful. It is gratifying to think that people actually are interested in this stuff. And I honestly never thought people would be interested in this kind of stuff. But it seems, 1,200 of them are.
Well,
Crazy.
I like the way you sort of frame the question about like your grandfather and working in the coal mines. My I was enthralled with a piece of fiction, historical fiction that my wife turned me on to that takes place in the small town outside of Monterrey, Mexico, where my dad
Okay.
grew up, and it's set during that time period. So it's the only window that I have currently, and besides some remaining family members, the only window I have into his early life, much less
Yeah.
my grandfather. So yeah, that's a great thing to think for
And,
people
and
to
that's,
think about.
I bet, Roberta, that is really precious to you, right?
Totally, yeah. And I got to
Yeah.
talk to the author not too long ago. She's a very
Wow.
popular Mexican author.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah, it
Amazing.
was
Yeah.
great.
Look, I think that insight is really is. I mean, sadly, I I didn't find it. My grandfather didn't write a book, but I can imagine how I would feel if it came around because these
Hmm.
are you can't put a price on that.
No kidding.
Well, I can 11.99.
Did you did you do traditional publishing or self publishing or some sort of
No, I
hybrid?
still well, my experience, Roberta, and this may be interesting to the listeners. My experience with music is such that I self-published. I have no interest in signing to a publisher. Because it certainly this is my experience. As I mentioned earlier, we own like 20,000 master rights, and it's maybe 2 to 3,000 of those are sort of either original works that I've written or my somebody in the team has written, or there may be arrangements of traditional of traditional pieces that are out of copyright. And we publish them ourselves because a publisher. Okay, let's imagine I went to a publisher with this book. Let's assume that a publisher was mad enough to want to publish it. What are they going to do? They're going to get me to do all of the things I'm doing anyway, right? Talking to people like you. I've all of the bands that I've played in. I've done podcasts. I've done a Level 42 podcast. I was in Level 42 for 10 years. Level 42 podcast of Swing Out Sister, Lisa Stansfield, Swing Out Sister, Jamiroquai, all of these bands. That's how I sort of promulgated this book by doing either a podcast or I write a blog piece for their website, or I'll do some kind of commentary on their Facebook fan pages, and that's all a publisher's going to do for me, really. They're just going to ask me to do the same stuff. So
Yeah.
that my feeling is that I may as well do it myself. I'm a pretty organized guy, and I know it's not for everyone, right? Self-publishing is not for everyone because there are quite a few sort of wrinkles to iron out. But for me, and my advice to anyone, songwriters or anything, is ownership is everything. If
Right.
you own your work, then you're in control of it. So, if you're a song, I would say if you are a songwriter, for example, or a singer-songwriter, um, publishers not really paying advances anymore, as far as I understand. So if you were to form your own publishing company, right, which is easy to in the UK, it's easy to do. You just say it exists, and it exists. Right? It doesn't even need to be sort of a limited liability company. If you do that, and then all of you self-publish all of your own compositions, then you're in the driving seat. If come the day when you have a hit or you have a record that is successful, okay, the publishers will come knocking on your door. Then you're in the driving seat, right? Because you already published that piece, and you can call the shots, right? Either you can do a single song assignment to them, or you can say, well, okay, if you want that song, I want you to buy my whole catalog. I want you to take over my whole catalog and pay me accordingly. You're in the driving seat. And for me, I think in this day and age where self-promotion, self-publicity is so much more possible, I think ownership is the answer, because then you're in the driving seat. You can at a later stage you can just sign one of your pieces to a publisher. You're in the drive. You make the choices, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That makes sense.
mm.
It sounds like the endeavor was very personal, but has it taken on? some sort of fit into your career strategy, or like as a continuing credibility, builder, revenue stream, or what's the actual value becoming?
I'm not naive enough to it's a young man's game, okay? And work was going to get less and less. Luckily, touch wood, I'm still working, still pretty busy at the moment, but that's not going to continue forever. And also, I'm in a position where I can pick and choose a bit more, and I want to do things that I want to do. And so the book for me is going to be a conduit just before COVID, the dreaded COVID, before COVID put paid to everything. I did a little tour called Blown It, and it was a lovely little show. It was just me, and all I did was tell a story, play a tune, tell a story, play a tune, have a little bit of bit of a question and answer session, and they were just lovely evenings. I met some really lovely people. I decided when it was going to be and how long it was. Do you know what I mean? And that is where I'm heading.
That's
I
great.
also, I think I mentioned earlier, I run a series of residential music camps. I'm very fortunate enough to have a house, a big old farmhouse in near Granada in southern Spain, and we take 8 students out there. I do a trumpet camp. I do a bass camp with Paul, the bass player from Jamiroquai, a guitar camp with Rob, the guitarist from Jamiroquai. So I take all of these people who are in my address book, guys I've known, right? They're all top guys. The drummer is a guy called Ash Sohn,
I know
who's
Ash.
Adele's
Well, I don't
drummer.
know Ash Stone. I know of him, and
Yeah, these are
Jamiroquai, of
world.
course.
Yeah, I mean these are world class guys. So this is my. I will never retire, Roberto. It will drive me nuts. I'd just be a wreck. I like to keep busy. I like to keep active, and I like to use my brain. And so this is the direction in which I'm heading. So these music camps, I started out doing like 2 a year, and in 2026, I've already got 18 of them booked. And it's lovely. I stay at my own house, and I get to swim every day, walk in the mountains. It's lovely. So there's that. But the book, getting back to the book is going to be my sort of entree into re sort of hashing that one man show. I've sent it out to a whole bunch of promoters in various theatres around the UK, and I'm hoping to put together or just beginning to put together a tour in December. I'm pretty busy right up until the middle of November, so I'm trying to put together a tour in December of that, and it's a lovely thing to do. It's something my wife and I can just tootle up there, and yeah, I go and tell a few stories, play a few tunes, and have a nice time. Meet some nice people. It's really lovely.
That's amazing. And where? Okay, so the book is called "Blown It." I'm
Yes.
slow. I'm very slow, Johnny. It just now occurred to me why part of why you named it that. I like the title a lot, but so where can people get it?
They can get it. So at the moment, it's available on Amazon,
Great.
both as a paperback and as a Kindle. You can also get. I had a lot of people saying, Can I get a copy with a dedication in for a friend or something like that?" So you can get that from my website, which is johnnythirkell.com. So you go to the website and go to the Blown It page, say what message you want, and I'll write it in there and post it off to you.
That's great.
So that's that. And then I'm just about to start the audiobook version. So yeah, the short answer, there's never a short answer with me, Roberto. The, the short answer is Amazon. Yeah.
Great. And then Blown It, the one man show, is kind of what you were alluding to a moment ago, right? Where you're telling
Mhm.
these stories as well.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. It's just I tell these stories, and there are so many stories, Roberta, that just didn't make it into the book. I mean, the book's already 316 pages long. I thought that's enough for any people to be losing the will to live by the time they get to the end of that. And actually, what I really, really enjoy about the one man show is it's different every night because now I have a couple of question and answer bits, right? And people will ask a question which will lead me off in an entirely different direction, and I'll end up telling an entirely different story, different to the one I planned to tell. And it's really, it just makes it really fluid. It makes it really interesting for me. And then of course I play some tunes in between all of this. It's lovely. I really love it.
And if someone listening to my little podcast wants to find out how to book a one-man show, Bullet One Man Show, can they find that out on your
Y-
website?
Yes, they'll find it on the website. Yes, there is a section called Blown It, and there's a book page and there's a contact details page where people can book me to do the show. Yes.
Cool. Well, I will put the website URL in the show notes, and for anyone who can actually remember or is writing it down, it's Johnny Thirkell. I guess the traditional spelling of Johnny, Johnnny, and Thirkell is
That's correct.
THIRKELL.com. And it's a great website, by the way, and this has been
Thank
a
you.
really great conversation. I appreciate you taking the time to speak with me.
Now, listen, thank you, Robert. It's been really lovely. I'm sorry I talk so much, but it's the nature of the beast.
I enjoyed it thoroughly.
Me too.
As an independent podcaster, your support means the world to me. You could even say I depend on it. With that in mind, here are some things you can do to help support us. Follow us on your favorite podcast app. Leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. Or shoot me a review by email, robonzo@unstarvingmusician.com, that I can use on the website. Or just share this episode with a friend. This makes a huge impact on our audience growth. You could also visit our crowd sponsor page at unstarvingmusician.com/crowd sponsor to learn of the many other ways of supporting the podcast, including a quick and easy online tip jar. It's like click, tip, done, easy, and super appreciated. You'll find many ways of showing your support there, including through our affiliate partners like Bandzoogle, Kit, Email, formerly ConvertKit, DreamHost, and others. The music you're hearing is New Gods Part 2, the instrumental mix by yours truly. You can hear the full version, download it, or buy it at robonzo.com. And if all this was too much to remember or process, just go to the show notes for this episode at unstarvingmusician.com to find links to all the stuff talked about in this episode. You can leave us feedback, questions, comments, complaints at unstarvingmusician.com/feedback. Thanks for listening. Peace, gratitude, and a whole lot of love.